Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG show for Thursday, February the 4th, 2021. So, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is in the news again. I was speaking yesterday about the fact that it turns out that she was a little economical with the actualite, as Alan Clark would say, with regard to what she was up to on January the 6th, the supposed Capitol riot, insurrection, coup, whatever you want to call it. And people are calling her a liar. Let's see. This is from Breitbart, Matthew Boyle. Some in conservative media have challenged Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez over her claims regarding the riot at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, saying that she was not technically in the actual U.S. Capitol building, but in a nearby House office building. Red State and One America News Network reporter Jack Posobiec, as well as the Daily Wire, published reports stating that AOC was not actually in the Capitol. While they are technically correct, she was in a nearby office building. AOC is also correct when she says these reports are misleading, as they are manipulating the fact that most people don't know the layout of the Capitol complex. Oh, I see. So she wasn't in the Capitol building, but she was nearby. Good enough. Let's see. AOC tweeted, "We were all on the Capitol complex. The attack wasn't just on the dome. The bombs Trump supporters planted surrounded our office too." Bombs? Oh, I didn't notice a lot about bombs in the first week of reporting what happened on January the 6th. Breitbart explains the U.S. Capitol complex is a series of buildings. The actual Capitol is at the center of it with the world-famous dome on top. There are also several House and Senate office buildings on the other side across the street, but connected underground via tunnels. Anyone who's been inside regularly and worked in the complex knows the office buildings are connected via tunnels to the actual Capitol building. The office building, well, this is a very repetitive story. The tunnels exist so members, staff, and press do not have to go outside to go between buildings. In fact, the tunnels are so sophisticated, they even have shuttles that run between some of the buildings. There are coffee shops, restaurants, stores, barbershops, salons, and more that operate in the tunnels underground as well. When someone is inside the Capitol complex, even the most secure of the buildings, the actual Capitol building, is not difficult to walk through the tunnels over to the office buildings for either the House or the Senate. Representative Nancy Mace had tweeted, AOC made clear she didn't know who was at her door. Breathless attempts by media to fan fictitious news flames are dangerous. My office is 2 doors down. Insurrectionists never stormed our hallway. Egregious doesn't even begin to cover it. Is there nothing? MSN won't politicize. The knock on the door was from a policeman who advised AOC that she would have to leave pronto because there was a suspicious package that had been found, which later turned out to be not a bomb. So let's see, we have more from Nancy Mace. Nancy Mace is defending herself after she contradicted AOC and stated no insurrectionists stormed our hallway in the Cannon office building after the New York Congresswoman was challenged by some conservative media outlets over her claims regarding the riot at the U.S. Capitol January the 6th. Let's see. While that Nancy Mace is discrediting herself less than 1 month in office with such dishonest attacks, AOC wrote, she went on the record saying she barricaded in fear. Nancy Mace, who else experiences will you minimize? Capitol Police in Longworth, custodial workers who cleaned up shards of glass. Very traumatic, sweeping up broken glass. I have experienced that myself. After, say, knocking a glass over a table or having it slip through my hands and having to get the broom and dustpan out. It's such horrible feelings. AOC also tweeted, all I can think of, yes, folks like her claiming that survivors are exaggerating or the stories of veterans and survivors in my community who deny themselves care they need and deserve because they internalize voices like hers saying what they went through wasn't bad enough. Oh, so now AOC is comparing herself to a combat veteran. Is she? AOC also accused Mace, a rape survivor, of attempting to shame or silence survivors of trauma. Oh, so we have two survivors of sexual assault going after each other. My pain is greater than your pain. AOC, this is where the true damage of what Nancy Mace is doing comes in. How many survivors are watching her? Who now, seeing her, won't get care or feel further shame or silence? Who won't speak up because they know there are voices in leadership ready to minimize their experiences? How many food workers or custodial workers or Capitol Hill officers who ran for their lives in Longworth or feared for their families in the weeks after the attacks now think their terror is less valid because of her statements? Mace's attacks are attacks on them too. Nancy Mace responded, fact check. I have not once discounted your fear. We were all terrified that day. I'm stating the fact that insurrectionists were never in our hallway because they weren't. I deal in facts, unlike you, apparently. She continued, but now in typical AOC fashion, you're making this political, even going as far as saying, I don't hear victims of assault. Me, of all people, you don't know my story. Shake my head. Just stop it. So says, oh, yes. And Nancy Mace responded to AOC. So says the Congresswoman who demonized Capitol Police officers like, 3 days ago? Yes, AOC apparently was much put out by the Capitol Police officer who knocked on her office door. Apparently he was too peremptory with her. Not enough please and thank you when he ordered her out of her office and out of the building. As I predicted yesterday, the fact checkers, of course, are going to be all over this. Let's go to Snopes, the universally highly regarded fact check site. Did AOC exaggerate the danger she was in during a Capitol riot? Mostly false. What's true? Ocasio-Cortez wasn't in the main Capitol building where the House and Senate chambers are located. However, Ocasio-Cortez never claimed to be in the main Capitol building when the attack on the Capitol began. Ocasio-Cortez was, as she stated, in her congressional office, which is located in a network of office buildings immediately surrounding the Capitol. And her office building was one of the two buildings that were evacuated. Yes, she was in the vicinity. Let's see. Online trolls went further by drawing a misleading comparison between Ocasio-Cortez and Jussie Smollett, an actor accused of staging a racist anti-gay attack against himself in January 2019. Oh, he's just been accused of this. Been accused of this. There are hilarious memes on Twitter. I'm sure you've seen some of them. One of my favorites being AOC clenched in agony, holding her face while the Hindenburg burns behind her. Many such cases. Let's go to the International Business Times. Did AOC lie about having a near-death experience at the U.S. Capitol during the riots? A near-death experience? So if you're in a bar and a fight breaks out 20 feet away, is that a near-death experience for you? Let's see what the IBT has to say. And conspiracy theorist Candace Owens also chimed in, piling on claims that AOC had faked her own attempted murder after having previously staged a photo shoot to spread lies about immigrant children in cages. Conspiracy theorist. IBT goes to Snopes, they are the final word on this. No question about it. Rioters, according to the IBT, rioters who breached the Capitol did voice their desires to execute lawmakers, and hours into the attack, one rioter even took to social media to write, "Assassinate AOC," as previously reported. This suggests there was imminent physical danger to AOC's life during the attack. The House trial brief for Trump's Senate impeachment trial also noted that it was not just those inside the main Capitol building who were in danger during the breach. Oh, I see. House Democrats make a claim, so obviously that makes it a fact. Makes it a fact. Let's have a look at the chat here. Hello to Chogokin666 and Hauper. Metal Mike says, who is Dr. Steve Pitsanik? And is he completely out to lunch? Never heard of the fellow. Again, from Metal Mike, Biden is canceling the troop pullout from Trashkanistan. Great, let's keep that 20-year war going. Yes, forever wars. We all love forever wars, and anyone who is against forever wars is obviously a white supremacist and probably a neo-Nazi. Remember the good old days under Barack Obama? When the United States Air Force was regularly, sending drones to bomb wedding parties. Good times. Good times. Roulette Cracked says, PTSD survivors of kitchen incidents. I dropped a bottle of ketchup once and fainted. Thank goodness for plastic ketchup bottles. Yes, thank goodness indeed. Heckma Warrior says she needs some kaopectate for her fake verberia. Again, from the same source, femsplaining, a typical. Okay. Metal Mike, Defense Secretary is from Raytheon. Time to smash the piggy bank for the weapons industry. Chogokin666, another phony left gatekeeper like Sanders. People that idolize these social democrats disgust me for their idiotic credulity. You may have noted, I was talking yesterday about how many members of the Senate and the House managed to become rich despite their relatively low salaries, or even spectacularly rich. Bernie Sanders is not rich, which suggests that he is honest. They're not very courageous, but not a crook. Hello to Professor Pohl. Let's go and look at, it's interesting about Breitbart, that, I guess they don't want to be seen to be extremist. So they're going to explain, just how complicated the Capitol is and how most people don't know this. Okay, let's see how that works out for them. Now, here's a very curious story from Reuters. You remember, prior to the inauguration, there was a scare because apparently 80% of National Guard members are white, or only 20% of them voted for Biden or something like that. So the idea that the National Guard was going to instigate a coup in Washington on January the 6th. But now apparently it's all of the military that is suspect. Too many white men, I suppose. The U.S. military on Wednesday acknowledged it was unsure how to address white nationalism and other extremism in its ranks, and announced plans for military-wide stand-downs, pausing regular activity at some point in the next 60 days to tackle the issue. The decision to hold a stand-down was made by Lloyd Austin, who made history by becoming the military's first black defense secretary. Okay, after a long career rising in the ranks of the Army. In his confirmation hearing, Austin underscored the need to rid the military of, quote, racists and extremists, unquote. Pentagon spokesman John Kirby said Austin ordered the stand down after a meeting with the U.S. military branch leaders who are under pressure to show progress in combating extremism after current and former military service members were found to have participated in the siege of the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. Have we been told why the doors to the Capitol, which are impenetrable to anything short of rockets, were opened? I haven't heard that. Have you? Why were they opened? Who opened them and why? I suppose that's not a particularly important question. Back to Reuters, the Pentagon has yet to define how it will deal with extremism or offer data estimating how many service members hold white nationalist ideology. It has also not disclosed how many troops have been disciplined for extremism. Kirby said, "We don't know how we're going to be able to get after this in a meaningful, productive, tangible way." And that is why he had this meeting today, and that is why he certainly ordered this stand down. It was unclear whether the announcement was meant to foreshadow any near-term concrete actions by President Joe Biden's Pentagon on whether the stand down was more of a symbolic move meant to demonstrate Austin's acknowledgement of the problem and continued resolve. The Pentagon did not define whether stand downs pausing regular activity across the U.S. military might last minutes or hours, or what commanders would do during that time to express opposition to extremism. The announcement came as mourners filed beneath the U.S. Capitol dome to pay a tribute to Brian Sicknick, the Capitol police officer who died from injuries sustained during the January 6th storming of the seat of government. The assault on the building led to the second impeachment of former President Donald Trump, who spoke at a rally in his final days in office and urged supporters to go to the Capitol and fight. His impeachment trial in the Senate for inciting the siege is scheduled to start next week. I don't know. Perhaps for several years, the U.S. military should simply stop accepting applications from white men or simply white people in its entirety. That might have some effect on its fighting ability. But once again, can one put a price on justice? I say no. This is pretty clear, in its intent. Who's doing the dying over there in Iraq and Afghanistan? Well, that would be white men overwhelmingly. And the U.S. military doesn't want them anymore. And it's been made very clear in all sorts of ways that white men are regarded as the enemy in the U.S. military. Why they would bother to sign up is an interesting question. Fort Hood in Texas. There have been a lot of deaths there. This is from August of last year. Everything we know about the 16 soldier deaths at Fort Hood this year. The embattled fort, this is from the New York Post. The embattled Fort Hood Army base in Texas has grappled with at least 16 deaths this year in what has become a series of mysterious disappearances and fatal incidents. The base was determined earlier this month to have the highest number of soldier murders and sexual assault cases among all Army installations, prompting officials to vow to investigate the root cause. Army Secretary Ryan McCarthy announced the independent probe into the base's climate, saying he hoped it would help them better understand why this is happening in this installation. Let's see, Privates Eric Hogan and Anthony Peake were both killed in a car crash north of Georgetown on February the 1st. This was a rather mysterious accident, apparently. Let's see, Sergeant Specialist Shelby Jones died March 1st after he was shot at a strip club in Killeen, several miles from Fort Hood. No arrests have been made. Specialist Christopher Sawyer was found unresponsive in his post residence March the 5th. Foul play is not suspected. Specialist Freddie De La Cruz was one of 3 killed March 14th in the shooting in an apartment complex in Killeen. Michael Wardrobe, a former Fort Hood soldier, was allegedly shot dead March 23rd in a dispute with 22-year-old specialist Jovino Roy, who was stationed at the base. Private Gregory Morales was found in a field near the base in Killeen. Authorities suspect foul play, and there are a number of others. Let's see. One which struck out to me, Sergeant Elder Fernandez. I'm not familiar with this name, Elder. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. A body believed to be the missing 23-year-old soldier was discovered hanging from a tree August 25th in Temple, about 30 miles from the base. Fernandez, who had reported sexual abuse prior to his disappearance, was last seen August the 17th when the superior dropped him off at a home in Killeen. An investigation is underway, and police say foul play is not suspected. Now, when I saw the picture of the late Sergeant Fernandez, I thought, I genuinely don't know whether this is a man or a woman. Well, it turns out that Sergeant Fernandez was a man, and he reported sexual abuse. And I wonder how much of this sexual abuse in the United States military is homosexual sexual abuse. But I'm not really expecting the media to pay much attention to that issue. Everyone who disagrees with me is an extremist, such as the line that we are getting from our elite. This is from Mary Louise Kelly at NPR. When it comes to domestic extremists, such as those who stormed the Capitol, a longtime CIA officer argues that the U.S. should treat them as an insurgency. Oh, I see. So domestic extremists who remain undefined are traitors and need to be dealt with accordingly. Oh, that means using counterinsurgency tactics similar in some ways to those used in the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. What? Robert Grenier served as the CIA station chief in Pakistan and Afghanistan in 2001. He went on to become the CIA's Iraq mission manager and then director of the CIA Counterterrorism Center from 2004 to 2006. Oh, I don't know. Perhaps this means when you get a bunch of good old boys having a barbecue, just lob some drones at them. Now, there's some counterinsurgency for you. We may be witnessing the dawn of a sustained wave of violent insurgency within our own country, perpetrated by our own countrymen, Grenier wrote in the New York Times last week. And without national action, he argues, extremists who seek a social apocalypse are capable of producing endemic political violence of a sort not seen in this country since Reconstruction. Oh, what about Black Lives Matter and Antifa? This is not political violence. It's not evidence of a violent insurgency. How long has the insurgency in Portland, Oregon, been going on for? In an interview with All Things Considered, Grenier discusses what that national action would mean. He said, I don't want to be one to suggest that somehow the United States is going to in any way resemble Iraq or Afghanistan at the height of violence. That's why I mentioned Iraq and Afghanistan, right, Grenier? But what I think is useful to have some way of thinking about the problem and thinking through the elements of the solution. So I think in any insurgency situation, you have committed insurgents who are typically a relatively small proportion of the affected population. But what enables them to carry forward their program is a large number of people from whom they can draw tacit support. And that's what I'm primarily concerned with here. I think what is most important is that we drive a wedge between those violent individuals and the people who may otherwise see them as reflecting their interests and fighting on their behalf. I think the most important element of the struggle, if you will, is information. We're not talking about an alien population here. There are friends of mine who believe that the election was stolen. There are members of my family who have very strong doubts. And I think there are a great many people who don't trust you, Mary Louise. I hate to be the one to break it to you, who don't trust NPR or the New York Times. But again, I think this is the work of a nation. I mean, it's trite to say that we need a national conversation. But in fact, that's what we need. Whenever you hear a member of the elite talking about, or the deep state even, talking about a conversation, it means they speak and you shut the hell up. Later, you will be quizzed on how much you have learned and how much your opinions have changed. Grenier continues, and so it's people, it's all of us who really need to be engaging with one another in a very sincere way, admitting what we don't know and trying to seek out the truth together. Because without that, I think that there's a level of distrust that is not only unfortunate for the politics in this country, but will also provide a basis for sporadic but endemic violence in this country. Says the former CIA man. So he worked for an agency which got pretty much everything wrong everywhere in the world from its inception. No, but definitely we should listen to Robert Grenier. Oh, by the way, the Congressman Marjorie Taylor Greene has been removed from her committee roles. Yes, she believes some outlandish things, or used to, and no longer, or so she says. I wonder what kind of outlandish beliefs we would find if we did close interviews, say, of members of the Congressional Black Caucus. You know, outlandish beliefs regarding the origin of AIDS, for example, or the origins of the crack epidemic, or whether certain fast food makes black men impotent. I was struck in one of these stories that so Greene has repented of most of her previous statements, but apparently she made a reference last year to the deep state, which definitely makes her a conspiracy theorist and an extremist. Okay, the lie has become so complete now that we're supposed to forget that just a few months ago, after initially decrying the existence of a deep state, a number of people, prominent people associated with the deep state, said, yes, the deep state exists, and yes, we are proud to be members of the deep state because it was the deep state that saved America from the depredations of Donald Trump. But once again, we're back to the deep state doesn't exist. Grenier says part of it is simply setting the proper national tone. Oh, these crude, rude people, because the left has always been about tone. It's always been about courtesy and decorum. Let's see. Another, I think, very important element that we haven't talked about yet is what I would refer to as insurgent leadership. The fact of the matter is that the most violent elements that we are concerned about right now see former President Trump as a broadly popular and charismatic symbol. Yeah, I wonder about that because most of the people associated with what is called white nationalism, whatever that might be, and I honestly have no idea what it might be, they think that Trump is a sellout, a traitor. And of course, they are infuriated by his closeness to the Jews. Grenier continues, he is their charismatic leader, whether he chooses to acknowledge it or not. You know, just as I saw in the Middle East that the air went out of the violent demonstrations when Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein was defeated and seemed to be defeated, I think that the same situation applies here. Are we going to see video of Trump pulled out of his hidey hole then? Is he going to be put on trial and executed? The fact of the matter is that Mr. Trump has lost. It's very important that people see that he has lost as a private citizen, but I think it's extremely important that his potency as a symbol for the most violent among us is somehow addressed. Oh, well, if he's lost and Joe Biden is in the White House now, wouldn't his potency diminish necessarily? Yeah, okay. You were stationed chief in Islamabad on 9/11, NPR asks, which meant it suddenly became your problem to find and kill or capture Osama bin Laden and other senior al-Qaeda leaders without comparing American citizens to al-Qaeda. Are there lessons that you take from that? No, we don't want to compare American citizens to al-Qaeda. Oh, no. Let's just talk about an insurgency among ordinary Americans, and apparently supporting Donald Trump is evidence of being part of an insurgency. How far are they going to take this? I wonder. So yeah, we've already talked about the congresswoman who was disciplined. This is from the Associated Press, Elena Shore and Will Weissert. Biden at prayer breakfast calls out, wait for it, political extremism. President Joe Biden on Thursday called for a confrontation of the political extremism that inspired the U.S. Capitol riot and appealed for collective strength during such turbulent times in remarks at the National Prayer Breakfast a Washington tradition that asks political combatants to set aside their differences for one morning. The breakfast has sparked controversy in the past, particularly when President Trump used last year's installment to slam his political opponents and question their faith. Some liberals have viewed the event warily because of the conservative faith-based group that is behind it. Still, Biden campaigned for the White House as someone who could unify Americans, and the breakfast gave the nation's second Catholic president a chance to talk about his vision of faith as a force for good. For so many in our nation, this is a dark, dark time, Biden said. So where do we turn faith? Senator Chris Coons, a Democrat of Delaware, said the event is an inclusive and positive one that recognizes the teachings of Jesus, but is not limited to Christianity. Yes, we're going to be seeing a lot more of this. Joe Biden has been around for an awfully long time. He first entered the Senate in 1973, and he was known to be a Catholic, or at least formally one. But in the last couple of months, and since he's been inaugurated, the man's practically a saint, despite his fervent support for abortion and attack on a religious order of nuns, the fact that he married two men in his residence in the White House. Apparently, Biden, it says here, is a devout Catholic. No, Joe Biden is not a devout Catholic. Apparently, when you're a politician and you show up at Mass once in a while, this qualifies you as a devout Catholic. Devout Catholics are few, but he is not one of them. Oh, but wait. Unity? No. Their idea of unity is perhaps not what most people understand. Unity. Healing as well. Norman Solomon, co-founder and national director of the progressive activist group Roots Action, warned Biden not to reach across any aisle to bigotry. Quote, "We don't need any unity with bigotry. I fear a subtext of this engagement is, can't we all get along? But that's not appropriate in this case, given the well-known right-wing and anti-gay background of the event's sponsors." Yeah, okay. I suppose Solomon could simply ignore it. It's an affront to him that Christians get together. Perhaps he should take that up with Joe Biden. Solomon said Democratic presidents have continued a tradition of attending an event where their Republican counterparts often felt more comfortable because they feared being labeled as anti-religious or non-religious. He said that Biden, a devout Catholic who attends Mass every week, could better send a unifying message by skipping the event and instead attending one that is truly bipartisan. God knows there are many religious leaders and gatherings that are devout and affirm human equality. This isn't one of them. Rachel Laser, president and CEO of Americans United for Separation of Church and State, agreed that there are far better ways than the breakfast for Biden to connect with people on the basis of shared spiritual beliefs. "We would love to work with the administration to figure out a way to change the sponsorship of an event like this and to make it a place for Americans of all different religious beliefs, including atheism," which apparently is now a religious belief. Yeah, okay. Both Laser and Guthrie Graves Fitzsimmons, a fellow in the Faith Initiative at the Liberal Center for American Progress think tank, pointed to the Christian symbolism seen during last month's Capitol riot as an opening for Biden to offer pluralistic, open language about faith going forward. Oh, I see. Perhaps the wearing of crosses and crucifixes should be banned in public. It's triggering. This is supposed to be a news story, and Elena Shore and Will Weissert could not find a single person, apparently, to defend the National Prayer Breakfast. Not a single one. Now, that's what I call journalism. Let's go back to the chat. Rioters equals feds, says Metal Mike off. I don't know. To a certain extent, perhaps. We know about that, what do you call himself? Jake Sullivan, He was certainly on the front line. Metal Mike says, who opened the doors? Who shot that woman? We'll find out when Capitol Insurrection Commission report is published by the deep state for our consumption. Steve says the Army is already choked by bureaucratic requirements. Crackdowns and investigations into troop loyalty are only going to make it more awkward. Well, I think that what we're going to see, they're not going to call it this, but the U.S. military is going to begin to install political commissars within its ranks. Now, this is practically an open admission by the Biden administration that they fear a military coup, that they believe that the Army, or at least the lower ranks of the Army, below flag officers, so hates the Biden administration that the Army itself has to be dealt with. Okay. Let's see. Anrun says, did she ever file articles of impeachment against Biden? She said she'd do that on her first day in office. Not that I've heard about it. Steve says, bureaucracy and national security think tanks and defense contractors are the deep state. Look up groups like the Atlantic Council. People move between it and government service freely. Yes, once again, very few people seem to understand that, these so-called NGOs, just how much power they have. I mean, people have heard of organizations like Greenpeace, say, or the Sierra Club, but there are hundreds, thousands of these organizations, and they wield enormous power. Yes, Biden and Trudeau are both devout, says Metal Mike. It was just pretty much more than I could stand when Justin Trudeau's father, Pierre Trudeau, died. Oh my, what a funeral they laid on for him at the cathedral in Montreal, because he was just such a devout Catholic. American Catholicism is the fast food of Christianity, along with Episcopalianism, says Hickman Warrior. I'm not really in a position to disagree. And okay, let's get back to it here. Let's get back to it. A curious article in the Atlantic, a profile of Senator Josh Hawley. Oh, by the way, you may have heard that Simon & Schuster canceled his book contract. Guess who just got a book contract? Hunter Biden is writing, or has written, a book. Apparently a title has been announced, and it's an inspiring story of his triumph over drug addiction. Can't wait. Emma Green asked the questions. The knives come out for Josh Hawley. Oh, they've changed the headline. The original headline is, why is Josh Hawley the most hated man in Washington? And the story begins by talking about just how accomplished Hawley is, and just how clever he is, and how powerful people were impressed with him from the very beginning. And former Senator John Danforth of Missouri served as Hawley's rabbi, one might say. Emma Green writes, Hawley's combination of conservative politics, news anchor gravitas, apparent ambition, and Ivy League success made him a target of liberal hatred from the moment he arrived in the Senate. But lately, all that Hawley specialness has attracted a special kind of rage from his former allies in the conservative world, too. Once again, kids, never call yourself a conservative, because conservatives hate you. On January 6th, the violent mob stormed the Capitol, stopped the certification of Electoral College votes. 5 people died, including a Capitol Police officer, Brian Sicknick. When news outlets around the world wrote the story of the riot, many illustrated it with a photo of Hawley raising his fist to a crowd of then peaceful protesters. The Missouri senator became the avatar of the congressional insurrection, the one lawmaker started before the mob showed up. Conservatives and liberals alike blamed Hawley for encouraging the Capitol attackers by questioning the legitimacy of the election. Sure, 7 other senators, including Alabama's Tommy Tuberville and Kansas's Robert Marshall, also challenged the results, as did 139 members of the House of Representatives. But Tuberville was schooled by Nick Saban, not John Roberts. The former Auburn coach wasn't marked for political greatness. It didn't even matter much that Senator Ted Cruz of Texas, who has a similarly elite resume, stuck it out with Hawley and disputed Arizona's electoral college results. Ted is now that just annoying fly in the room. Okay, we'll swat it eventually, a Republican campaign operative told me. Josh is seen as so much worse. Hawley arrived in Washington in 2019 with a claim to glory. He had defeated a Democratic incumbent, Claire McCaskill, flipped a Senate seat in a terrible election year for Republicans, and done it all before his 40th birthday. But glory doesn't last long when you're a junior senator, so Hawley perfected the ultimate Washington attention play, defying GOP orthodoxy. And apparently he didn't take the word of the Federalist Society as gospel, despite the fact that the Federalist Society had recently helped raise millions for Hawley's Missouri campaigns. It was a double win for Hawley. He established his conservative credibility and declared himself a judicial gatekeeper. This became a pattern. Each time Hawley took a stand, he didn't just earn headlines and attention, he rebelled against one of his mentors. When Roberts voted to overturn Louisiana abortion restrictions this summer, Hawley complained on Twitter. When another Supreme Court decision significantly expanded alphabet people rights, Hawley launched a thinly veiled attack on the Federalist Society, arguing that religious conservatives had gotten screwed. Hawley even teamed up with some of Congress's most dreaded socialists to commit heresies. He backed antitrust enforcement. He argued against free trade with China. He urged the government to subsidize workers' wages. Wow, he's practically a communist. In December, he stood outside the Senate chambers with Bernie Sanders, conservative enemy number one, and told reporters that Congress needed to approve another round of $1,200 stimulus checks. For some of Hawley's one-time allies, these transgressions alone were enough to raise their ire. I asked David McIntosh, a co-founder of the Federalist Society and the president of the Club for Growth, Washington's most hardcore enforcer of free market orthodoxy, what he thought of Hawley's decision to object to the certification of the Electoral College results. You can come down either way on that, he said. What was truly unforgivable is that the organization spent $3.1 million on Hawley's 2018 Senate race, and he's not the guy the group's leaders thought they were electing. Quote, we're at this point concluded he's no longer the type of free market, limited government candidate that the club would want to support, unquote. Free market, limited government. Once again, where is this mythical free market? Limited government? So-called conservatives have been in charge of the United States several times in recent decades. Have they made government more limited? No, they have not. And they seem to believe that the military is somehow not part of the U.S. government. And in all of the budget showdowns between Obama and the Republicans, it was always the same, that the Republicans would demand cuts in social programs and the Democrats would demand cuts in the military. And then they decided, well, we're not going to do either of those things. McIntosh sees Hawley's Electoral College intervention and his turn toward populist economics as outgrowths of the same misdirected ambition. Maybe Senator Hawley has simply come to the belief that the conservative position offers little to the great mass of Americans. Hawley, however, calculated that his duty was to reflect a GOP base that believes in Trump. I've heard from people like I've never heard before, he said on Fox. They have major concerns about the integrity, the fairness of this election. They expect me to stand up and raise those concerns. He called for a full investigation of potential irregularities and enact election integrity measures. The move was classic Hawley. He upstaged Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. Oh dear, you don't want to get on the wrong side of the turtle, do you? He set up a hypocrisy trap, citing Democrats' past attempts to challenge elections, including in 2016, and daring reporters to call this time different. Yes, you all know Stacey Abrams, the gap-toothed woman from Georgia who lost the 2018 election for governor and then insisted for months afterwards that she had actually won, that she was the real governor of Georgia. Maybe that never happened. Maybe that never happened. Hawley did not call for or expect the violence. If you squint, it's even possible to see a principal stand in what he was doing. Like many people, Hawley seems to believe it's a bad thing that so many Americans distrust the electoral process, and he argued that it was better to debate those misgivings than ignore them. His objection was not grounded in an allegation of fraud, but a lawyerly theory about constitutional power. He found a plausible, if not very persuasive, way to question how mail-in voting had been conducted, as opposed to repeating the Trump team's unhinged claims. But when a mob invades your debate society, it's time to gavel the discussion to a close. The violence was an invitation to humility that Hawley declined. After the senators had returned to their chamber and it was time for him to speak, Hawley thanked law enforcement and denounced the day's violence, then plowed ahead with his arguments about Pennsylvania's constitution. Oh, so apparently Senator Hawley is not willing to play by his enemies' rules. And we all know that is one of the hallmarks of being a true conservative. And a lot of these true conservatives have turned on Hawley, which can only be a good thing. Jeremy Rosen, a Federalist Society member and failed Trump judicial nominee, said, if we cannot take a stand against what Hawley stands for, then what have we been fighting for all of these years? Orrin Cass, a conservative policy wonk, whose book I praised, his book on the American worker, I praised some time ago on when I was doing the book club on Luke Ford's stream. He's tried to develop a theory of populist economics that conservatives can champion post-Trump, wrote that Hawley's and Cruz's electoral college objections were obnoxious and self-serving, undermined vital norms, and played with the fire that, in fact, raged out of control. Again, you know, and Stacey Abrams is not the only one. But let's stick to Stacey Abrams because she was so important in the 2020 presidential election and indeed in the two runoff Senate votes in her state of Georgia. She claimed that the election had been stolen from her. She claimed for months that she was the legitimate governor of Georgia. Why was she not smacked down for challenging vital norms? Well, we know. We know about that. The past few weeks have only strengthened Hawley's appeals to some admirers and financial backers. The junior senator from Missouri's decision to object to the election results showed tremendous courage, read an email from the Senate Conservatives Fund, a PAC created by former South Carolina Senator Jim DeMint. Conservatives should stand shoulder to shoulder with him in defending our cherished values, he said. He was also praised, Hawley was, by Rachel Bovard, Senior Director of Policy at the Conservative Partnership Institute. Hawley's former allies have turned on him because he represents truth they do not wish to see. Most conservative voters like Trump-style politics. Many think that the election was stolen. Of course, they were wrong. They were wrong. The GOP electorate is becoming more working class and ever so slightly more racially diverse, and populist economics may appeal to these voters more than free market orthodoxy. Free market orthodoxy appeals to nobody except people who are paid to spout it. Say two. Hawley had once offered a redemptive fantasy to a certain kind of conservative, all the benefits of Trump with the polish of a statesman. He was supposed to save elite conservatism from Trump's crass embrace of conspiracism, trade skepticism, and thuggish assaults on the rule of law, not mimic it. Apparently, John Danforth is very, very unhappy. Very, very unhappy. Emma Green concludes, just a few months after he became a senator, Hawley wrote a searching essay about the theologian Pelagius, a 4th century ascetic who preached about individual achievement, our inherent perfection, and the virtue of choosing our own way. Hawley delivered the essay as a commencement speech at the King's College, an evangelical liberal arts school in New York City. Of all the things he could have spoken to a crowd of young, talented Christians about, he chose Pelagius's arrogance. Quote, It is not the privileged, but the common man or woman, not the elite, but the everyday person who moves the destinies of the world, unquote, he told the graduates. The theologian misunderstood human nature. Hawley argued, we are fragile, we are fallible, we suffer weakness and need, and we all stand in need of God's grace. By forgetting their obligations to their communities, Hawley suggested even the most accomplished individuals can lose their way. Yeah, a little double-edged sword there in that concluding sentence. If this profile of Hawley in the Atlantic was meant to wound him, I don't think that it has. I've been quite impressed by Hawley since he took office, and my admiration for him has only grown since that time. A conservatism that says wars forever, everywhere. Of course, the rich, super rich, have to get richer. Don't you understand globalism? Don't you understand efficiency? Yeah, that conservatism. Well, conservatism is dead. Just stop using that stupid name. Let's go to the chat. Oh, Hikma Warrior says, if only someone like Franco would appear. Metal Mike says, Salazar would be better. I have a great deal of admiration for Salazar. There was no atrocious civil war in Portugal as there was in Spain. I think that has a lot to do with explaining the differences in their administration. Roulette Crack says, you would think that once people on the right were killed, there would be outrage, but no, they just focus on the one death and the others are placed in the trash. Oh, I heard Biden's reneging on the 2K checks, says Metal Mike. Well, I don't know. Is anyone surprised? Jay Miller says free market limited government. That's like 0.01% of the population. Yes, but people who work for the Cato Institute and the American Enterprise Institute and other think tanks continue to push this. Again, these people should be asked. It should be demanded of them. When have conservatives, so-called supporters of the free market and limited government, ever made the market freer or changed the rules so that it is not, I don't know, so inviting to criminals? When have they ever made government smaller? The answer is never. Never. Chogokin 666. Oh dear. Franco was a Bourbonist traitor to the Phalange. Well, the Phalange had its place in Franco's administration, but they were kept at arm's length, and seems to be quite rightly. This is some pretty disturbing news from Reuters. World faces around 4,000 COVID-19 variants as Britain explores mixed vaccine shots. Oh, mixed. Oh, boy. Oh, boy. Oh, boy. Oh, boy. Researchers began to explore mixing doses of the Pfizer and AstraZeneca shots in a world first. Thousands of variants have been documented as the virus mutates. Yes, just like every other virus, including the so-called British, South African, and Brazilian variants, which appear to spread more swiftly than others. British vaccine deployment minister. Are you kidding me? Britain actually has a minister of vaccine deployment? Hang on just a minute. Okay. Now, sorry for the interruption. There's nothing I can do. But things seem to be heating up in the last few days with the police showing up directly across the street from where I'm sitting here several times a day. And I try to have a nap before the show, and I was rudely awakened, quite rudely awakened by a deranged man screaming, "I'll effing kill you," over and over again, except he didn't say effing. They have security guards 24/7 outside. I gather the security guards have been given instructions not to interfere with people screaming obscenities and making death threats. I suppose they're just supposed to inform the police who may or may not arrive. But I digress. British Vaccine Deployment Minister Nadhim Zahawi said it was very unlikely that the current vaccines would not work against the new variants. While thousands of variants have arisen as the virus mutates on replication, only a very small minority are likely to be important, according to the British Medical Journal. Okay, so thousands of variants. What does that mean in practical terms? It means it serves as another excuse for keeping lockdowns going forever, because who knows whether any of these mutant viruses will be the big one. From Adam Taylor in the Washington Post, governments around the world are desperate for coronavirus vaccines, with many battling publicly for limited doses and accusing others of hoarding. Yet amid this rush, some countries are not only refusing potential doses produced by rivals, but officially banning them. Ukraine recently banned Russian vaccines despite new peer-reviewed data that suggests a high efficiency for Moscow's leading candidate, Sputnik 5. The Iranian government, on the other hand, has banned all U.S. and British-made vaccines and approved Russia's Sputnik 5. In Taiwan, where officials have spoken out since last year against vaccines made in China, officials recently reiterated that imports of these vaccines are banned and warned that Taiwanese civilians living in China could face quarantine when they return home. It is an inversion of the logic of vaccine nationalism, which has led powerful nations to scoop up as many doses as they can in the hope of emerging from the pandemic. More than 80 million vaccine doses have been given out in more than 50 countries, with some speeding well ahead. But Ukraine, Iran, and Taiwan have not formally begun their vaccination programs. And while Taiwan has been widely praised for its successful handling of the pandemic, Ukraine and Iran have struggled, resulting in considerable death tolls. Compared to what, though? That answer should be in that story. To experts, it's an alarming, though not necessarily surprising, trend. Where are the experts that say that we should not be alarmed? We should not always be alarmed. They seem to be pretty thin on the ground these days. Some shocking news from Florida, and this is from popculture.com. Amid the ongoing coronavirus pandemic, a Florida supermarket is spreading outrage online after video surfaced of customers and employees going about their business without masks. The 15-second clip was shared Wednesday by NBC's Sam Brock, who was astonished when he walked into the popular Naples, Florida grocery store, only to see people both young and old flouting the rules for mask wearing. Brock, in his tweet, wrote that a sign outside the store cited medical exemptions, preventing Brock from asking any questions. The video has since been viewed more than 2 million times, raking in over 9,000 retweets and sparking even more comments from those outraged over the clip, which comes as the death toll in America continues to grow. Responding, one person wrote that having a medical exemption for wearing a mask should not mean come on in and infect everybody, adding that it means instead you can get your groceries shopped and delivered to you at the sidewalk or delivered at home or some other method. It's not a free pass to be an asshole. Somebody else said the video was pathetic, with another person writing, they're all immune until they're not. And then an overworked, overstressed healthcare professional has to clean up their mess. Here's the fun fact. You're probably more at risk from healthcare professionals than you are from everywhere else, given the lamentable tendency of healthcare professionals to infect people in hospitals and other medical settings. But no, they are the heroes. They are the frontline warriors. Several social media users noted that the owner, Alfie Oakes, is notoriously anti-mask. Oh, notoriously anti-mask. And in the past has come under fire for calling both the COVID-19 pandemic and the Black Lives Matter movement hoaxes. Oh, Black Lives Matter, good, COVID-19, bad. I just don't see the connection there. How exactly did he call the Black Lives Matter movement a hoax? How exactly did he call the COVID-19 pandemic a hoax? I would think that we need a little more detail. Oakes, who owns Oakes Farm Seed to Table, shared similar sentiments when speaking with Brock in an interview that aired Thursday on the Today Show. Quote, I know that masks don't work, and I know that the virus has not killed 400,000 people in this country. That's total hogwash, Oakes said. Why don't we shut the world down because of a heart attack? Why don't we lock cities down because of heart attacks? Despite Oakes' remarks, mask wearing has been widely encouraged throughout the course of the pandemic as a means of slowing the spread of the virus. According to the Centers for Disease Control, experimental and epidemiological data support community masking to reduce the spread of the virus. The CDC also notes that masks help reduce the emission of virus-laden droplets, which is especially relevant for asymptomatic or pre-symptomatic infected wearers who feel well and may be unaware of their infectiousness to others. These people are estimated to account for more than 50% of transmissions. Are they now? Are they now? And with more on that, let's move to Australia, where the state of Western Australia has gone completely crazy because of one case. One case. Rocco Loiciono writes in the Spectator Australia, in his famous political discourse, The Republic, the great philosopher Plato deemed a tyranny. The Republic. Oh, okay. Okay. The great philosopher Plato deemed tyranny the fourth and worst disorder of a state. Tyrants lack the very faculty that is the instrument of judgment, reason. As explained by the American Constitutional Rights Foundation, the tyrannical man is enslaved because the best part of him, reason, is enslaved. And likewise, the tyrannical state is enslaved because it too lacks reason and order. Listening to the Western Australian Premier, Mark McGowan, over the last year, and especially over the last week, it would seem that he has developed the tyrannical hallmark of a lack of reason that Plato described. Last Sunday, McGowan hit the panic button to put over 2 million West Australians in lockdown over just one case, a security guard working in hotel quarantine. At the time of writing, no other positive cases had been confirmed after 3 days of lockdown. One hallmark of tyranny is hubris. McGowan wants to eliminate coronavirus entirely. He says repeatedly at his press conferences that he wants to crush the disease. Yeah. I'm going to show COVID-19 what's what. I'm going to take it outside. He has constantly lectured the other states on how this was the best approach since there had been no community transmission of the virus in Western Australia since last April. He said January the 8th, we need to eliminate it. We are an island. We need to use our advantages to eliminate the virus. The idea that you keep the virus ticking along and you close down postcodes or you deal with a cafe or a restaurant here or a suburb there, I don't think is right. Australia is an island, and of course there are travel restrictions, but Australia cannot be sealed off. Otherwise, they'd starve to death. The whole country would stop. So people are coming into Australia. Aided and abetted by his main cheer squad, the West Australian Mr. 91%, that's the approval rating the West polling given, must have gotten a huge head swell and thought we were all mugs. The fact is that McGowan was warned repeatedly that Western Australia had to be better prepared. That wasn't hard. As David Flint wrote recently in The Spectator, all the politicians needed to do was to follow world's best practice as exhibited by Taiwan. Over 900 Australians have died, 130 times the number of deaths in Taiwan, because politicians here, such as McGowan, have the hubris to think they can eliminate a virus. Okay, I just got to check something here, and this will come up almost instantly. The question is, how many people live in Australia? And the 2021 estimate is 25.7 million people. 25.7 million people. Over 900 Australians have died. This is over a period of a year. This does not strike me as being anything even close to a crisis. Anything even close to it. How many people died in Australia over the last year because they were old and they fell down? How many people have died of illegal drug overdoses in Australia over the last year? Will Jones at Lockdown Skeptics passed the peak. That was weeks ago. Chief Medical Advisor Professor Chris Whitty has said that the UK is past the peak. Well, actually, yes, it was weeks ago that the peak occurred. That was December the 28th. And why hand sanitizers do more harm than good. Yes, we're all supposed to wash our hands, 30, 40, 50 times a day? And to use antimicrobial solutions of some sort or another. According to Dr. Irina Metzler, in an essay at Lockdown Skeptics, hand sanitizers, or hand satanizers, as I prefer to dialexize, are as ubiquitous a part of the pandemic as the masks. Unlike the masks, which will cause mainly individual problems, if you wear a mask, you're restricting your own breathing, not someone else's. Hand sanitizer use at the level we've been seeing for the past 10 months is going to become one hell of a headache in the none too distant future. That's because apart from destroying your own personal microbiome, we've got a bigger picture to consider. Antimicrobial resistance across the board has been getting worse already before the pandemic hit. Already in 2018, it was noted that alcohol-based hand sanitizers in particular were turning bacteria into the next level of superbug, namely VRE, vancomycin-resistant enterococci, one of the leading causes of infections in hospital. We have to be careful about this new trend towards heavy reliance on alcohol-based hand sanitizers. Soap and water should be our number one protection, both in hospitals and for personal use. The next question is whether the bacteria will continue to evolve and tolerate higher and higher doses of alcohol, or even stop responding entirely. Is it possible for these organisms to develop complete resistance to alcohol? These questions were also raised by researchers years before the advent of SARS-CoV-2 and the ubiquitous little bottles of hand gels. Why face masks don't protect the wearer. A revealing review of their inadequacies is a piece written in 2016 by dentist John Hardy in Oral Health magazine. He concludes the primary reason for mandating the wearing of face masks is to prevent dental personnel from airborne pathogens. This review has established that face masks are incapable of providing such a level of protection. Unless the Centers for Disease Control, national and provincial dental associations, and regulatory agencies publicly admit this fact, they will be guilty of perpetrating a myth, which will be a disservice to the dental profession and its patients. Prescient, you might think, and depressing that these lessons of the need for rigorous testing of infection control measures and of the ineffectiveness of masks were not learned. Too prescient, it seems, for this article has been taken down from the publisher's website with just a note left in its place. If you are looking for why face masks don't work, a revealing review by John Hardy, BDS, MSc, PhD, FRCDC, it has been removed. The content was published in 2016 and is no longer relevant in our current climate. Please note that the content from Oral Health Group is primarily intended to educate and inform dental professionals. Will Jones comments censorship and erasure of the past to try to shore up the flimsy case for face masks, not exactly a sign of confidence in the evidence. SAGE, which is the body which has been advising the British government on COVID-19, quietly released a document on January 13th which admits that masks are no protection for the wearer, though intended to protect others, and they aren't even very good at that. How about that? SAGE released a document in January prepared by a subcommittee which it endorsed, saying that masks were primarily a source control. Cloth and surgical masks are thought to offer the viewer little protection, and citing an estimate for their typical impact on transmission of 6 to 15%, possibly as high as 45%. Conclusion, wearing face masks may reduce primary respiratory infection risk, probably by 6 to 15%. It is important to balance evidence from RCTs and observational studies when their conclusions widely differ and both are at risk of significant bias. COVID-19 specific studies are required. They also say the environmental and economic costs of regularly using face masks are notable and only partly abated by reuse. Yes, there was a fellow, Captain Sir Tom Moore, who became a hero because of his determination to walk 100 laps of his garden before his 100th birthday. And the centenarian who died with coronavirus in Bedford Hospital on Tuesday, well, he was infected there, raised 32.8 million pounds in aid of the Health Services charitable wing. So what happened to that money? The BBC has reported that it went on snacks, tea breaks, and a well-being wing for hospital staff. Perhaps some more ICU nurses might have been a better buy. I don't know. I don't think that there's enough that can be done snack-wise for our frontline heroes. Wouldn't you say? I certainly would say. I certainly would say. Let's have a look at Alex Berenson. And once again, there are serious questions that have been raised about the efficacy and safety of the various vaccines, well, particularly the mRNA vaccine. Who is covering this? Apparently, nobody but Alex Berenson. And there are disturbing stories from all over the place. Here's a vaccine benefit. Local doctors are reporting a surprising effect of the COVID-19 vaccine that mirrors a symptom of breast cancer. Berenson comments, more COVID vaccine benefits. Radiologists can brush up on their cancer screening skills. 16% of women have seen enlarged lymph nodes. With other vaccines, occasionally we will see swollen lymph nodes, but it was a surprise how many we've been seeing. Don't worry, though. A treatment that causes a massive lymphatic overresponse in healthy people for weeks cannot possibly have long-term side effects. After all, we have months of safety data on these vaccines. Months, I say. Nothing to see here. Move along. Also, blowing up the placebo arms from the clinical trials because the vaccines are so awesome that withholding them from the placebo recipients would be unethical. See, really, that's the logic. Is going to make long-term safety data even easier to get. The whole point of these double-blind studies is you have the group that gets the new drug and the group that doesn't, and then you compare the results. But again, the same thing happened with AIDS drugs. Berenson reports a Virginia woman, 58, collapsed and died after her Pfizer shot. They called it flash pulmonary edema, and the doctors told me that it can be caused by anaphylaxis. This story escaped what increasingly feels like an overt ban on side effects reports. And finally, from Berenson, to the people telling me that I'm rooting against the vaccine, of course I want the vaccine to work. I want it to have no side effects and work perfectly. I also want a pony. What I want doesn't matter. What you want doesn't matter. Vaccine, gonna vaccine. How well it vaccines depends at the cellular level on complex factors few people are qualified to judge, but should ultimately be visible at the personal and national level. At this point, the cost-benefit of the vaccine is unclear. The companies rushed the preclinical, early clinical work and enrolled the wrong people who are unlikely to become seriously ill or die from SARS-CoV-2 in their trials. They did so with the approval of regulators, by the way. Further, since the side effect data became available, health authorities and the media have downplayed it. So we are very much flying blind here. That's why the Israeli data matter so much, and that's why they are so troubling, and why the efforts to mislead people about them by looking at pieces rather than an entire picture are even more troubling. If the mRNA vaccines or other vaccines work, great, but rooting for them cannot blind us to what is really happening. And if public health authorities are actively discouraging the media from reporting side effects, as they seem to be, the dangers rise exponentially. And I want to talk about something a little bit different now. I want to talk about a fellow called Rick Beato and his recent problems with IP, intellectual property. I know that some of you who listen to my live stream are familiar with Beato. He is a musician who has a YouTube channel with, 2 million subscribers. And he's very good at what he does. I have seen a lot of his videos. He's very enthusiastic about what he talks about. It's clear that he loves music and he loves sharing it with people, which I guess explains his success. And he has a series, What Makes This Song Great? And he's run into a little bit of trouble. In his most recent video, he explains, his rant as he calls it, he explains that he uses musical examples because it is difficult to talk about the worth of a specific song without using musical examples. And he doesn't claim fair use for these samples, although he could, but he doesn't. And so what has happened in many, many cases is that various music producers have demonetized his videos. That is to say, they get the money from these videos instead of Beato. And Beato says that he has absolutely no problem with this. Of course, he also mentioned a long list of bands who have actually promoted his videos about their work. And because, I don't know, I guess they were delighted to be praised. They thought that these videos were going to help sell more of their recordings, and they didn't claim the money from Beato's videos either. But he did a video about a song by the Cars, who were a band from Boston, who were one of the biggest bands of the 1980s. They have, in recent years, reconvened without Benjamin Orr, their bass player and lead vocalist. And the Cars without Ben Orr is not the Cars, as far as I'm concerned. But apparently, a Universal Music Group, which owns the Cars recordings, they were very unhappy about Rick Beato promoting the Cars. I mentioned a few months ago that Red Letter Media made a video about an hour long, which was pretty much a commercial for Gremlins 2, which is one of my favorite movies. And Warner Brothers yapped to YouTube, and it got taken down. And eventually, there was so much fuss made about this, including from Joe Dante, the director of Gremlins 2, that Warner Brothers relented on this. And I thought, just how stupid are these people? Because you cannot watch that Gremlins 2 review on Red Letter Media without thinking, oh, well, I need to buy the DVD or Blu-ray of that if I don't have it already. Because apparently this is one of the funniest movies ever made. And they show clips, but not the whole movie. No, they're stealing our intellectual property. Well, let's see. After 790 videos, Rick wrote yesterday, in nearly 5 years of my channel, I received my first copyright strike for the Cars. What makes this song great? The strike is from Universal Music Group. I have come to a conclusion that it's a waste of time to talk about these older artists. UMG should release the claim because it's BS. Now, again, as he says in the video, to most people today, any music that is more than 10 years old might as well be 1,000 years old. Beato is in his 50s, and he does keep up with new music, and he does talk about the latest popular music being produced. But, when he's talking about great albums or great songs, a lot of these come from the past. And apparently, Universal Music Group seems to believe the boomers are never going to die. Because when the boomers die, who is going to be buying Cars CDs or Cars downloads? It's just incredibly short-sighted. 3 copyright strikes and you're out at YouTube. Yes, here's what it said specifically. A copyright owner asked us to take down your video because they believe it contains material that violates their copyright. As a result, your video was removed from YouTube. Your channel received a strike. If you get 3 copyright strikes, your account, along with any associated channels, will be subject to termination. What can you do? Do nothing. Strikes expire after 90 days as long as you complete copyright school. That sounds fun. Request retraction, submit counter notification. Deleting the video will not remove the strike. Well, that's good to know, isn't it? Rick continues, I have never disputed a single claim on my channel citing fair use. Out of 99 What Makes This Song Great episodes, only 2 had been blocked: Fleetwood Mac and Simon and Garfunkel. Neither one, however, did I receive a copyright strike for. UMG released the claim. You can see that the strike was done manually, not by a bot. Someone from the publisher or UMG did this deliberately. The video had been out for weeks and had 350,000 views. I never really used Twitter, but I'm pissed. Oh, but it gets worse. Perhaps it has been decided, the music companies have decided that this bad man who makes videos telling people that certain singers and bands are wonderful, that this cannot be allowed to happen. 12 hours ago, Rick tweeted, day 2 and another strike. UMG removed the strike and put my Cars video back up. Thank you. Now Sony Music has given me a punitive copyright strike on a video that was blocked last month. Paul Simon is one of the greatest songwriters of all time. Sad to see. I just want to teach music and make videos, but I will fight this gratuitous BS. The Simon and Garfunkel, What Makes This Song Great, has been up for 2 years, and Paul Simon was receiving all the profits. If you want it blocked, fine. Just remove the copyright strike, please, Sony Music. Paul Simon is a genius songwriter. Don't let your music fade with my generation. There is so much to discuss about your musical contributions. Please reconsider. Copyright strikes are punitive. The video had already been taken down. I will make another one today about this. Well, yeah, it's possible that Paul Simon doesn't know anything about this. There's been lots of examples in the past where I say, directors have asked to use certain songs in movies and they've been turned down. And then, when the band or the songwriter found out about this, they said, no, of course I want my song in this movie or TV show or whatever. So I suppose it's possible that Paul Simon doesn't know about this, but if he does know, then he really should do something about it. He's getting the money from the video, so what more could he possibly want? Let's go to the chat. Anran said, that Ben Orr certainly had the lead singer looks. It was funny, he always had the mop top in the beginning, and at one point he cut his hair rather short. And it seemed to me he looked a lot like the young William F. Buckley Jr. I think Okasik said something like, if a song needed a great vocal, Ben would sing it. Dan Allison said he's wrong about Simon, who is an elitist hack. He may be an elitist. I would say that Bookends, Simon & Garfunkel record, which came out in, I believe, 1968, is really a tremendous record from start to finish. Anran likes Paul Simon. Did Rick O sing more songs than Orr? He also wrote the songs, or certainly had the better voice. Orr had much the better voice. My favorite song by the Cars is Let's Go, and of course that's Ben Orr singing on it. I suppose Rick specialized in the more quirky songs. Roulette Cracked. Play Misty for me, please, Kevin. That's a reference, to the Don Siegel, Clint Eastwood film? Well, I've got a Don Siegel film coming up, next week. So any further films from Siegel will have to wait. How come Twitter hasn't found a reason to ban Berenson yet, says Anrun. Good question. Good question. They use underarm deodorant, basically locking poison in their body, says Roulette Cracked. Yeah, I found out years ago that the places where they make computer chips, you were not allowed to use antiperspirant deodorant because it contains aluminum. Inhaling bacteria all day is great. You know, that there's a school of thought that the reason that you see so many sickly kids now with asthma and other complaints is because of a lack of dirt. That from time immemorial, children would go out and they would literally play in the dirt. That's what we did when I was a child, even unto, when I was a teenager, But now, oh no, you can't have children play in the dirt. You can't have them come home, with muddy feet or muddy hands or dust on their faces. They need to be well scrubbed. And so the hypothesis goes that, one builds up a certain tolerance to bacteria. But if one is not exposed to bacteria, then bad things happen, such as, perhaps asthma, perhaps autism, even. I find it absolutely remarkable that all of these complaints, asthma, allergies, they simply didn't exist for the whole time I was at school. No, they didn't exist. But now we're rife with them. Does anyone believe Joe actually received the vaccine, says Metal Mike? I don't know. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. I don't, just because he says he did, I certainly don't trust it. Tricky Who says, just returned from Kroger's, hundreds of Musketeers, almost none of them saying a thing. Out of all them, the only person flashing a smile was moi. Were you wearing a mask, though? If you smile when you're wearing a mask, how would anyone know that you're smiling? And again, it happened to me again today that, when I leave my room to go out in the hallway, to go down to the lobby, I have to wear the mask. And the number of times that I've gotten all the way down the stairs and then I realize I've forgotten my mask and but then, I go out and I'm wearing the mask and then I don't take the mask off. And this is becoming a problem. This is becoming a big problem. Roulette Crack says, the scariest thing I've ever seen in my life is seeing people arguing about who should get the vaccine first on Twitter. Total disconnect. Makes me want to take 3 years of MREs and live in a cave. Okay. I'm going to move on to James Burnham's Machiavellians now. Shortly, I'm going to be talking about Fritz Lang's M. The composition and character of the ruling class. Gaetano Mosca rejects many theories which have tried to apply the Darwinian theory of evolution directly to social life. He finds, however, a social tendency that is indirectly analogous to the process of biological evolution. The struggle for existence has been confused with the struggle for preeminence, which is really a constant phenomenon that arises in all human societies, from the most highly civilized down to such as have barely issued from savagery. If we consider the inner ferment that goes on within the body of every society, we see at once the struggle for preeminence is far more conspicuous there than the struggle for existence. Competition between individuals of every social unit is focused upon higher position, wealth, authority, control of the means and instruments that enable a person to direct many human activities, many human wills, as he sees fit. The losers, who are, of course, the majority in that sort of struggle, are not devoured, destroyed, or even kept from reproducing their kind, as is basically characteristic of the struggle for life. They merely enjoy fewer material satisfactions and especially less freedom and independence. On the whole, indeed, in civilized societies, far from being gradually eliminated by a process of natural selection, so-called, the lower classes are more prolific than the higher. And even in the lower classes, every individual in the long run gets a loaf of bread and a mate, though the bread be more or less dark and hard-earned, and the mate more or less unattractive or undesirable. Interesting. We see today the vast difference between the lower class and the middle class, because the middle class is the hated class. And, the lower class, particularly racial minorities, they have been the victim of systemic discrimination, still are. So they deserve all these things. The middle class, which is a productive class, apparently is scum and must be punished. And as we find out, for a great many people in the middle class now, actually finding a mate has become difficult for various reasons. Reproduction is off the cards for a great many of them because they are not allotted enough resources to procreate in the way that their, say, fathers and grandfathers did. You may have been confused by the reference to dark bread. Until fairly recently, I don't know, let's say the 60s or 70s, poor people ate dark bread. Richer people ate white bread. You see this as it's a meme in many, like, Warner Brothers and MGM cartoons, that all he had was a crust of bread, and it was brown bread. Burnham continues, the outcome of this struggle for preeminence is the decision who shall be or continue to be members of the ruling class. What makes for success in the struggle? Or in other words, what qualities must be possessed by individuals in order that they may secure and maintain membership in the ruling class? In answering a question like this, it is above all necessary to avoid the merely formal. Spokesmen for various ruling classes have numerous self-satisfying explanations of how superior morality or intelligence or blood or racial inheritance confer membership. But Mosca, like all Machiavellians, looks beyond the verbal explanations to the relevant facts. Well, they're still saying that today. If you look at the people, if you look at the senators of the United States, or you look at the members of Congress, well, obviously because they're just so smart. They're just so superior. They are? Really? Those clowns? I don't think so. Mosca finds that the possession of certain qualities is useful in all societies for gaining admittance to the ruling class or for staying within it. Deep wisdom, altruism, readiness at self-sacrifice are not among these qualities, but on the contrary, are usually hindrances. Mosca writes, to rise in the social scale, even in calm and normal times, the prime requisite, beyond any question, is a capacity for hard work, but the requisite next in importance is ambition, a firm resolve to get on in the world, to outstrip one's fellows. Now, those traits hardly go with extreme sensitiveness, or to be frank, with goodness either. For goodness cannot remain indifferent to the hurts of those who must be thrust behind if one is to step ahead of them. If one is to govern men, more useful than a sense of justice, and much more useful than altruism, or even that extent of knowledge or broadness of view, are I have trouble with this word, perspicacity, a ready intuition of individual and mass psychology, strength of will, and especially confidence in oneself. With good reason did Machiavelli put into the mouth of Cosimo de' Medici the much quoted remark that states are not ruled with prayer books. A certain amount of work is almost always necessary to achieve success, work that corresponds to a real and actual service to society. But work always has to be reinforced to a certain extent by ability. That is to say, by the art of winning recognition. And of course, a little of what is commonly called luck will not come amiss. Those unforeseeable circumstances which help or seriously harm a man, especially at certain moments. One might add that in all places, at all times, the best luck or the worst is often to be born the child of one's father and one's mother. Yes, you hear these people rabbit on about equality of opportunity. There is no such thing, and there could never be such a thing. And any attempt to enforce equality of opportunity, well, I don't know. I guess you just have to take the people with good parents, with smart parents and the like, and separate them and maybe throw them into orphanages. Or if you have people who are too clever, just whack them on the head until they suffer brain injury and are thus much less clever. Burnham comments, these qualities, a capacity for hard work, ambition, a certain callousness, luck in birth and circumstances, are those that help toward membership in any ruling class at any time in history. In addition, however, there is another group of qualities that are variable, dependent upon the particular society in question. Quote, members of a ruling minority regularly have some attribute, real or apparent, which is highly esteemed and very influential in the society in which they live, unquote. To mention simple examples, in a society which lives primarily by fishing, The expert fisherman has an advantage. The skilled warrior in a predominantly military society, the able priest in a profoundly religious group, and so on. Considered as keys to rule, such qualities as these are variable. If the conditions of life change, they change. For when religion declines, the priest is no longer so important. Or when fishing changes to agriculture, the fisherman naturally drops in the social scale. Thus, changes in the general condition of life are correlated with far-reaching changes in the composition of the ruling class. And that is enough Burnham and Machiavelli for today. I am going to go to Theater Thursday. And first, a quick look at the chat. Good catch on ore looking like WFB, Kevin says, and run. Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you for that. He was the last of Americans with that affected Anglo accent. Well, he did go to school for some years in England, but his great friend, Brent Bozell, was from Oklahoma, and he went with Brent Bozell to some store in Oklahoma, and he asked the person behind a counter some question, and he was quite taken aback with the reaction that the clerk seemed to be infuriated and said something like, "Oh, just stop it with that fake British accent." Of course, that's not an Oklahoman voice, but you know, you can imagine that in your head. So the movie I am talking about today, it's called M for murder, which is the German word which means, well, murder, as one might imagine. It comes from 1931. It was written by Fritz Lang and his then wife, Thea von Harbo. It stars Peter Lorre, Otto Wernicke, Gustav Gründgens. The cinematography is by Fritz Arno Wagner, and it was produced by Nero Film AG. I've talked about Fritz Lang on Theater Thursday before. I reviewed his 1945 movie, Scarlet Street, which stars Edward G. Robinson in one of his finest performances, Joan Bennett and Dan Daria. And it is the message of this film, once again, is white knighting. Don't you do it. Scarlet Street is really remarkable in its ending because there were certain types of endings which were forbidden by the production code. Essentially, the production code almost demanded that every ending be a happy ending, or that virtue always triumphs, that evildoers receive the just punishment for their crimes. I won't spoil the movie for you, but if you're used to movies produced during the constraint of the production code, then Scarlet Street will be a great surprise. Lang was born in 1890 in Vienna and died in 1976 in Beverly Hills. Like many people in Vienna, in Austria, he was the result of a mixed marriage, that his father was Jewish and his mother was a Catholic, but she converted. His mother was Jewish and she converted to Catholicism, and he was raised as a Catholic, and he never denied the importance of the Catholic education that I had. Lang served in the Austrian army during World War I, where he was wounded several times, and he suffered severe damage to one of his eyes, which resulted with him wearing an eye patch, which I guess he was considered very formidable on the set, and the eye patch made him even more formidable. Lang is associated primarily with what is called a German Expressionism, and it's difficult to describe Expressionism in film, except to say that it is very much anti-realistic. It is highly stylized, particularly in the shape of sets, which are not. They're exceeded. They are stretched. Rooms are made to look sinister because of their dimensions. The camera angles, the so-called Dutch angles, are often used, where people are shot from a very high angle or a very low angle. In many of the cases, the acting is similarly non-realistic, and the subject matter is often fantastic. So let's look at the films of Fritz Lang from the beginning. He made a lot of films, as people did in those days, and many of them are lost. I suppose the first film of his that came to notice was The Spiders, or Die Spinnen. And he made Dr. Mabuse. He made, 3 films about Dr. Mabuse. And in 2 parts, in 1924, Die Nibelungen, Siegfried, and then Kriemhild's Revenge. The film that made him famous worldwide is from 1927. It's called Metropolis. And it is a dystopian view of the future. In 1928, he made Spione, or Spies. And he was forced out of Germany because he was half Jewish. Lang used to tell a story, which is almost certainly untrue, that no less than Joseph Goebbels himself offered him control of the entire German film industry if he would consent to stay in Germany. No, as I say, that almost certainly never happened. That Fritz Lang got out while the getting was good. He first arrived in Paris, where he made a film there, and then in 1936 he came to America. The American film industry, if one subtracted all of the Jewish refugees from Europe, from the American film industry, well, it would be much lesser than it is, and that's an understatement. This film, M, is to a very large extent about mob justice. And this is the theme of his first American film, Fury, which is very, very good. Now, Fritz Lang, was associated many years with films that be considered B pictures. You don't see the grandeur of his German films. I guess Lang decided that the studios are willing to pay me to make films on certain subjects, and so this I will do. That Lang is, in Germany, Lang was associated with Expressionism. In America, he was associated with noir. And just a tremendous amount of great movies. You Only Live Once with Henry Fonda. Let's see, Manhunt with Walter Pidgeon and Joan Bennett, who appeared in several of Lang's films. Ministry of Fear with Ray Milland, based on a Graham Greene novel. The Woman in the Window, again with Joan Bennett and Edward G. Robinson. I suppose there were few better in Hollywood on the subject of the femme fatale than Fritz Lang. Cloak and Dagger, The Secret Beyond the Door, Clash by Night, The Big Heat, which is a movie with a considerable fan base. Of course, it stars Glenn Ford, Gloria Graham, and a young Lee Marvin. And Fritz Lang returned to Germany where he made his final 3 films, including The Thousand Eyes of Dr. Mabuse. And famously, he appears in Jean-Luc Godard's Le Mépris, or Contempt, which is one of the seminal Nouvelle Vague films. And he plays, well, himself. He is, of course, Contempt is a film about making films. And Fritz Lang was seen to be a kind of a godfather of the Nouvelle Vague, or New Wave movement. M is about a serial killer, a pedophile serial killer. It stars Peter Lorre. And Peter Lorre, Peter Lorre was in many great films, including The Man Who Made Too Much, Who Knew Too Much, Alfred Hitchcock, and The Maltese Falcon by John Huston. But he's very funny in Frank Capra's Arsenic and Old Lace, I must say. He's very funny in that film. Cary Grant, just a terrible, terrible overacting. Peter Lorre became associated just almost exclusively with horror films. And near the end of his life, he was almost forgotten or just associated with the kind of movies, terrible movies that you would see on local TV shows. But Peter Lorre, of course, was immortalized. He made films for Warner Brothers, and so you see caricatures of him in many Warner Brothers cartoons, and with the bulging eyes that he had, I mean, instantly recognizable, and a kind of shifty or panic look about him, which of course makes him entirely appropriate for M. I mentioned that Peter Lorre is the star, but apart from one scene in which you see him making faces before a mirror, which I put up on my Twitter account, Lorre actually doesn't enter the film until about 40 minutes in. Sound-wise, this is a rather curious film because it is a talkie, but there are many scenes, often long scenes in it, in which there is no sound whatsoever, even though we can see people speaking. So we learn that there is a large reward for the capture of a man who has killed, I believe at that time, 8 children. And we are introduced to his 9th victim, who is a charming little German girl who is supposed to come home for lunch. And, the movie begins with a description of poor people in Berlin, poor working people. You see a woman dragging a hamper, very heavy hamper of laundry up a flight of stairs and handing it to another woman. And these women are clearly exhausted by all the work that they must do. And you see a mother, and she is washing clothes the old-fashioned way, like this, washboard. And then she sees the cuckoo clock. The cuckoo clock announces that it's noon. And we see a smile on her face. And why is she smiling? She's smiling because her beloved daughter is coming home from school to eat lunch. And we see her preparing the lunch. And we see her setting out the table for her little girl. But what the mother doesn't know is that the girl has been waylaid by Peter Lorre, who has a balloon, a colorful balloon animal for the little girl. And of course, she's naive and she goes off with him. And the death is handled quite remarkably, actually, because we don't see any of it. The girl was bouncing a ball. Oh, what a pretty ball, little girl, Peter Lorre says. And then we see a bush and some open ground, and we see the ball roll into the open ground. And then camera pans up, and we see her balloon, which has been caught in electrical wires. This is pure cinema. And of course, it's a cinema that expects the audience to have a certain, rudimentary level of reasoning. This film is the camera work in it is quite remarkable in that we see just by the tracking of the camera or the changing of the angles in seamless shots, how Lang can move from one thing to another without cuts. And of course, long shots mean more tension. That is something that has been largely forgotten in motion pictures these days, with this just continuous cutting, such that it is impossible to maintain any kind of tension. So the mother asks someone else living in her apartment building where her little girl is. Didn't she come home for lunch? No, that must have been some other little girl. And she panics, starts rushing about trying to find her daughter, to no avail, of course. There is a great deal of macabre humor in this film. That at the very beginning, we see the young girls from the apartment building singing a song, and it's Odd Man Out, that the chopper is going to come for you and you can't escape the chopper, and he's going to cut you into mincemeat. Children having no fear of death. It doesn't make any sense to them. And the mother of the girl who's about to be murdered yells at the children to stop, and they're told to stop. And one of the other women says quite sensibly, well, if we can hear them singing, then at least we know that they are still alive. Peter Lorre's character, he whistles. And he whistles the famous melody from In the Hall of the Mountain King from Grieg's Peer Gynt. And this whistling becomes a motif, and it becomes the means by which he is identified in a most fantastic manner, actually. So this last murder has sent the people of Berlin into an absolute frenzy. And any man who even talks to a little girl is apt to be set upon by a mob and beaten. And apparently everyone is under suspicion. And the movie makes clear that everyone understands, that the police understand, that the government authorities understand, and even the criminals understand that this state of affairs cannot be allowed to continue. Lang in his movies like to show powerful people in rooms. And in this movie, this may be the greatest smokers movie I've ever seen. I don't know that I've ever seen so much tobacco smoke in a movie. Neither have I ever seen a holder for a cigar. Of course, we've all seen cigarette holders, but a cigar holder, that was certainly new to me. This is one of the first filmic examples of what we know as the police procedural. A crime has been committed. The police seek to find out who committed that crime and to apprehend them. How do they go about it? And we see how they go about it. Well, our killer has sent a letter to the newspaper, and he had sent a previous letter, which the newspaper did not print. Now, it's always been controversial for newspapers, this question of whether they should, as it were, corroborate with killers. The second letter is printed, and in the second letter, The killer announces that because you have been disrespectful for me, in other words, I'm going to keep killing people. And we see a similar thing, probably influenced by this film, with the Zodiac killer in Don Siegel's Dirty Harry, starring Clint Eastwood. And fingerprints are examined. His handwriting is analyzed, and the usual suspects are turned up. And it seems that every criminal or dodgy person in the city of Berlin is rounded up and asked to explain themselves, to produce their papers. And we see that this is very much hard cheese on prostitutes, because of the belief that a man who frequented prostitutes was, is more likely to have aberrant sexual urges than a man who does not. Now, in the Weimar Republic, the number of women working in prostitution was barely believable. And we see the prostitutes, they are not best pleased by this, because essentially their business has been shut down. That no one wants to go to prostitutes anymore because, of course, Johns do. They flee from the police, and the idea that they would be suspected of being a pedophile child killer. No, obviously no one wants that to be thought of him. We are introduced to the flip side of the police, and they have their own organization, which seems fairly formal. Actually, fairly formal, and they seem pretty clever for criminals. At least the leaders. Their leader is called Der Schranker, the safe cracker, and they come to a conclusion that we are going to have to find the killer. Why? Because if we don't, there will be no more business for us. So you see, for the rest of the movie, there is this competition between the police and the criminal fraternity as to who can find our killer first. We also find out that it would seem that the criminal element has, they've made inroads into the police. But everyone is to be pressed into service. And we have been introduced to the many beggars on the streets of Berlin. Why would there be so many beggars? Well, because of the various economic crises of the Weimar Republic. And of course, the many wounded and particularly blinded in the First World War. And so who better to know who is on the streets than the beggars? Because the beggars are always on the streets, except when they have their repasts, of which we are shown one, and a very particularly pleasing scene because people who are hungry, very hungry, enjoy food in a way that people who are not hungry do not. And one of the beggars remembers when he sold the balloon to Peter Lorre, and he remembers him whistling in the Hall of the Mountain King. And this information is placed into the heads of all of the beggars. And there's a tremendous tracking shot where we see Peter Lorre running through the streets and finally breaking into a panic because all of the beggars have caught on to him. And he's eventually trapped in a building, and the criminals get him first. And they are going to try him. He is even given an advocate but the advocate is not expected to do a very good job for him because, well, we know that he's the killer, and so he must die. Now, our killer, he reacts against this this sentimental justice on behalf of the criminals. I mean, these people, they didn't care that little girls were being raped and killed. It didn't affect their earnings, so they didn't care. It was only when it became a threat to them that they decided to become moralistic about this. Doubtless, many of these criminals are engaging in selling disgusting sexual services themselves. This is, it's widely noted that criminals, including, murderers even, get very sentimental, when they talk about children, and they want you to believe that they're actually deeply moral people. Well, no, they're not deeply moral people at all, or else they wouldn't be committing crimes up to and including murder. Peter Lorre's character, he makes the argument that he has no free will, that he is living under compulsion to kill, that it causes him agony, but there is nothing that he can do about it. And he makes a famous speech. What right have you to speak? Criminals, perhaps you were even proud of yourselves, proud of being able to crack into safes or climb into buildings or cheat at cards, all of which it seems to me you could just as easily give up if you had learned something useful, or if you had jobs, and if you were not such lazy pigs. I cannot help myself. I have no control over this evil thing that is inside me, the fire, the voices, the torment. And he is saved from the mob, but I don't know what sentence would await him in Weimar, Germany. I know perhaps he would be sent to some sort of a clinic. That sounds very liberal. And what is the moral, the lesson of the story? There isn't one, actually. It ends with the Elsie, the girl who was killed at the beginning, her mother saying, "No sentence will bring the dead children back," which is true enough, but that doesn't mean that people should not forfeit their lives for committing murder. My own view is I don't care whether they are deemed to be insane, that anyone who commits murder must be punished to the fullest extent, which means death. This is a exceedingly powerful film that you see all of the various elements in it. I say the police procedural, the conspiracy, the unlikely allies, or just a remarkable way of finding someone, employing beggars. It's a psychological movie as well. And of course, there is it's not a surprise that this movie became a sensation and is revered to this day. Now, I have to say that about 10 or 15 years ago, there was almost no Fritz Lang to be found, even on DVD, and the DVDs were generally atrocious. Nothing on Blu-ray. Now, most of Lang's work, both his German and American work, is available on Blu-ray, which is simply a tremendous advance in scholarship and a delight to cinephiles. If you're interested in this movie, I suppose it plays regularly on the Criterion channel. But if you want physical media, which I always recommend, there is a Criterion DVD. I own a version that was a Blu-ray that was produced in Germany, which I bought at the time, because this movie is 110 minutes long, but for years and years and years, the versions that were shown on television or on VHS or on DVD were truncated by about 15 to 20 minutes. But that problem the missing footage has been found. DVD Beaver, which is authoritative in these matters, recommends the Masters of Cinema version from the UK. Unfortunately, it is region B locked, so you need a multi-region Blu-ray player. But it is absolutely loaded with extras. It has the Blu-ray version and the DVD version. And, oh, by the way, DVD players can be easily programmed. Just look it up on the internet to play any film from any country. DVD is harder or impossible in that respect. It's a three-disc set from Masters of Cinema with 2 audio commentaries, a different release, a 1932 British release, featuring different actors, alternate takes, and Peter Lorre's first performance in English. Zum Beispiel Fritz Lang, a 1968 documentary with Fritz Lang discussing his cinema, and a 48-page illustrated booklet. But the Criterion Blu-rays are never less than good, so that is certainly a safe bet. Let's go to the chat. Glib Medley says it's a beautiful, bleak film. Yes, there's no a lesser filmmaker would have ended with some sort of resolution that we are going to end this scourge. We're going to remove this scourge from humanity. Well, no, that can't be done because there are wicked, deranged people at all times. Aaron says, Kevin, I've never seen a second of either Mad Men or Breaking Bad. Which would you recommend DVD binge watching first? I would recommend Mad Men first, I guess, because, well, there's a problem with Breaking Bad, and this is true of many such shows, that you are forced to positively identify with a criminal. And as the show progresses, Walter White's crimes grow in importance. There's a lot more variety in Mad Men. That is to say, you have more characters that more time is spent on. And I don't know. Breaking Bad tends to venture into nihilism. Again, if you're cheering for a criminal is nihilistic, but that's the nature of such shows. Have you seen The Americans? I have seen The Americans, and I did enjoy it. That woman who played the female lead, Kerry Russell is her name. She was famous for her hair some decades ago. I do not find her attractive. I don't. She's an exceedingly hard-looking woman. And the character that she plays in The Americans, she's a dead-eyed, soulless killer. Yes, and a communist. Again, there's a problem with The Americans that you find yourself rooting for the communists, especially since the FBI counterintelligence officer, who is the third lead of the show, is a bit of a dummy. And he has a zipper problem. But no, I enjoyed it quite a bit. Kevin, can I recommend Harlan County, USA? Great documentary. So I have heard. It's an American hardness. Maybe she was the American of the future, says Glib Medley. Perhaps. What else do we have here? Roulette Crack says, feel nostalgic for the days of social pressure. Now one even bothers showing up anymore outside courts if something like this happened now. If they were Native Indian women in my country, yes. We had a disgusting spectacle a decade ago in British Columbia where they actually had a show trial They actually had a show trial with the government paying for relatives of the victims to be in the court. And then, making a statement, after the verdict, what a great, this is what should have happened or whatever. It just all looked like a stitch up, Enron says Peter Lorre's character in The Maltese Falcon is my favorite gay villain. Yeah, I get that now, but I remember reading it and being mystified by, well, Peter Lorre is obviously homosexual. He is? How? Well, he has a scented handkerchief in his pocket. Oh, okay. I didn't know that was the proof. He's supposed to be Hungarian. I don't know. Maybe that's the sort of thing that Hungarians of his class do. But, I'll take everyone's word for it. Of course, what the Gunsel in the Maltese Falcon is supposed to be homosexual as well. Is he not? Media Hit says, I have a version of Metropolis with Giorgio Morodi's soundtrack. Still have to watch it. Yes, that is a curious episode in film history. That Metropolis was very hard to get a hold of. I think this was even before VHS. And so a version of Metropolis, not the complete version or whatever, it's a silent film, of course. And so Giorgio Moroder, the electronic disco king from Germany, he has this pounding soundtrack featuring Queen. And there was a video that played on MTV constantly. So that was, people were associating Metropolis with Moroder and Freddie Mercury, which is amusing. Halper says Peter Lorre's daughter was nearly abducted by the Hillside Strangler in Hollywood. Ironic in light of M. Let's see, what the Raoul Walsh effect. What is that in regards to... wow, they're going to go after Gab Harder, says Ogan's Iron. I hope Torba is ready. Oh, someone's... Ortega y Gasset. I have to get around to him. That his great book, The Revolt of the Masses. Leo Strauss, not a fan. Not a fan. Oh, Halper, early 20th century theorists of political power, Schmidt, Mosca, Burnham, Bredow, Spengler. And what Glib Medley mentioned, Isaiah Berlin, and Gamian mentioned Leo Strauss. There is Voegelin as well, a German who ended up in America. Enron says, Kevin, if you keep forgetting to take your mask off, doesn't that mean wearing it doesn't really bother you much? No, it does bother me enormously because I feel as if I'm suffocating. But now I have been, they call this operant conditioning. You know, like I'm a rat or a mouse in one of Calhoun's experiments. It's just, ugh. It's horrifying. Media hits, Breaking Bad, first season. Well, I've mentioned this to others, that the condition of Walter White, I mean, his financial condition. Okay, he has a wife who who quit working. And he has a son who has special needs. He's a teacher. In fact, he's the head of the faculty of science at his high school. And unless New Mexico has the weakest teachers union in the United States, it seems a little false. Of course, we know that we learn that Walter White is self-defeating. I mean, we see him at the beginning where he faints and he finds out that he has terminal lung cancer, that he's been working in a car wash. And it's demeaning work. Well, not so much the work itself, because his boss is horrible and takes great pride in demeaning him. But this is a man, with a PhD. This is, there's tutoring. There's private tutoring that exists. There are companies that hire, people for private tutoring. Much more lucrative than detailing cars at a car wash. But again, we find out that Walter White has been self-destructive in his life. And the original sin committed against him, I suppose you could say, that resulted in his bitter nature. He seems to have brought this on himself, actually. You know, you could ask him, what? You threw all that away over a woman? Yeah, okay. And let's see. Oh, Visionary Companion did not like the use of the Badfinger song Baby Blue. In the end, I love Badfinger, I love Baby Blue, which is about a girl that the songwriter broke up with. It's sort of an apology song to her. I thought it worked beautifully. The use of music in Breaking Bad, absolutely outstanding, but the use of music in Mad Men, absolutely outstanding too. The End of the World, Skeeter Davis's song at the end of the episode about the Kennedy assassination, or the episode where Don is told to give interviews, and he gives a rather unsatisfactory interview. He doesn't want to give too much away about himself. And the second one, he unwinds and he blows his own horn and, you know, fades out, and it cuts to that song by the Nashville Teens, Tobacco Road, which is not only one of the greatest rock songs ever recorded, it's just perfectly appropriate to Don Draper. Okay, that is the show for today. Tomorrow is the book club, and I'm going to be talking about Glenn Kenny's Made Men, which is about Goodfellas and Martin Scorsese, of which there is a lot to say. I will be back on the air tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. I'd appreciate it if you click on the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you have not done so already. If you would like to support this live stream with a donation, which I could really use at the moment, frankly, my PayPal account is linked to kevin_grace@hotmail.com. Once again, kevin_grace@hotmail.com. If you're Canadian, a donation can be sent directly to me via Interact at kevingrace@shaw.ca. And I will leave you with this, as always, in these days of social atomization and civilizational collapse, I do dearly wish that you, my dear viewers and listeners, manage to form a genuine human connection in order to ease the burden. Good night.